Hey folks, it's Chris Crazy House here, and I'm just going to give a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. So if you do not want to watch it, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to be talking about dead children. So if you don't want to talk about that, or there's not a subject matter that you want to discuss, I perfectly understand that. Okay, you don't. That it's a downer. So and before the things that I went through, I might have thought the same thing and I might have skipped a video like this. So I'm giving you a fair warning. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. And more importantly, talking about parents who have lost children, whether it be through stillbirth, miscarriage, or what they like to call infant death syndrome. That's kind of a catch-all term. That there really is no such thing. It's just your incidents where your child might pass away or die after they're born. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about, or if your child died from a disease or something like that too. But it's been 6 years for me since what would have been my oldest child passed away back in 2012, and this week is actually the anniversary of that we lost our first child. She was stillborn. And what's interesting about this week is that this is the first time in 6 years where the days actually line up exactly, like the days of the week actually line up exactly with the dates of the events that led to my daughter's passing. So, I want to talk a little bit about it. I haven't talked about it maybe in 2 or 3 years. I've mentioned it offhand in some of my other videos, but those who have followed me since then, because obviously I was doing YouTube videos way back then too. I did a few videos about it when it happened because I just felt like I needed to get it off my chest, okay, and that was part of my therapy in dealing with it. But I just want to talk a little bit about it, dealing with this type of situation 6 years out, and how I feel about it now. And I will say that there are times when it feels like it was a long time ago, like it was something like 20 years ago. And there are other days where I feel like it just happened yesterday. Okay, so it's one of those things where, like, I can still remember. I remember all the details of that specific day when it happened, from the way the weather was, from the way the car ride to the hospital was, to the way the hospital room looked, to the lighting in the room, to all the people that were there, the different doctors that came in. I think like 3 or 4 doctors came through the whole damn time. To the stay in the hospital for 2 days afterwards. To what was on TV at the time. I remember that day, Sherman Hemsley had just passed away. The guy who played George Jefferson on The Jeffersons had passed away that day, and the Dark Knight shooting had also just happened that day. Well, not that day, but during that I think like the week before. That dude rolled up into the movie theater and shot up all those people during the premiere of The Dark Knight. So like I said, I remember everything very vividly from that time. So, and excuse me, what was hard for me then and now, and I look back on it, I've told this before. I was having a great year that year, all the way up until that happened. That it was, I would say, other than the year, other than the first year when I was married to my wife, and the year that I had my second daughter, that was one of the greatest times of my life, literally up until that point. I was very happy. It was something. It was a deliberate pregnancy. My wife and I had waited, even though we had been married for a time. We had waited to have a child, and we put real a lot into it. We bought a new car. We were buying new furniture for the place. We had an apartment. Obviously, we didn't have a house. My wife was still in school, but at the time, my career was going great. I had done some film festivals. I was working in games, social games, and Everything was going smoothly, like I said, until that, and I thought having this baby was going to be the icing on the cake for 2012. I really did. I thought that was going to be the best time of my life, but obviously it turned out absolutely different. And when we lost her, it was so devastating that I honestly didn't see how I was going to survive the future. And for anyone who's gone through that, you don't know how you're going to live on without your child. It's one of those things where you literally can't see past that point anymore. To the point where I didn't really know what I was supposed to do anymore, because I had lived up my life to a point where I had worked so hard for goals and accomplishing goals, and you know, getting to that point, I thought that everything I was doing was going to be for having this family. And then you do all this stuff, and then the family doesn't show up, and that doesn't come to fruition. You kind of wonder, like, okay, what the hell am I supposed to do with my life now? And I really couldn't see past that point. I wasn't suicidal, I will say that. I wasn't at a point where I was suicidal. I was just more in limbo. That's probably the best way I can put it. And I was very out of it. I mean, I disappeared from certain social media sites for a good month, and I didn't come back until right around my birthday in September. That's when I really started getting back into social media, because I just didn't want to. I was just more into myself, and I remember at the time I was watching a lot of, like, if I did, I would stay up late. I watched like a whole bunch of like anime, a lot of stuff like straight from Japan, just to kind of keep my mind off of what had just happened. And the job that I had was very work intensive, so I was pouring all my brain energy into that during the day. And taking care of my wife also half and half, because she had some issues after the loss. Physical, I mean, the mental scars are still there, but the physically, she had an infection, so I had to take care of her too, because her fever, she had a very high fever, so we had to take care of her as well. But even after we came home, like I said, I would stay up very late at night just watching TV until I was so sleepy that I couldn't stay up, because I didn't want to be thinking about what had happened before I went to sleep. Because obviously that's just, if I had a quiet moment, I was just going to be sitting there and crying the whole time about what had just happened. So the thing I want to say is, the people who have gone through that then, or who might be going through it now, or who might go through it in the future, just want you to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. For me, it came in the fashion of the fact that my wife and I, we moved to a new place, kind of started over, and we do have a child now, and that's a weird spot to be in too. From having if you're someone whose first child died and then like you have a second child, your reaction to that second child is always going to be a little bit different. Like, obviously I do think that we spoil my daughter now because of what happened. There are a lot of things that I let my daughter get away with that I don't think I would if my first child had not died. I cherish those moments I had with my second daughter. And there are times when I'll just sit there and just like stare at her and look at her or hold her. Like yesterday, we were just sitting there at the kitchen table, and she ran up to want to, sit in my lap, and I just picked her up and she sat in my lap, and we just sat there talking about nonsense, whatever, a 3.5-year-old wants to talk about. But I just wanted her close to me and holding her and looking at her eyes and have her look at mine and seeing her smile and laugh. Just like little moments like that mean everything to me. My daughter, coming into my office and saying good morning to me, or saying good night before she goes to bed, means everything to me now. I cherish every little moment I have, because not to be morbid or think negatively, but you never know. And especially in the crazy world that we live in, you never know when that person that you love and cherish, or even the ones that you created as your child, could be easily taken away. So you always have to cherish every little moment. Like I said, I think back when my wife was pregnant with my first child, I think I kind of took it for granted that the pregnancy was going to go okay and my child was going to be here and I would have all the time in the world to spend with her. So I wasn't as in tune as I was with the second pregnancy. Like my wife had our second child, I would talk to my wife's belly and try to spend as much time as I could. Because like I said, at that point, I mean I was a wreck, nervous when my wife was pregnant, to the point where I didn't even announce that my wife was pregnant. Like we didn't tell our family until the baby was at 20 weeks in the womb, and I didn't tell anybody that I knew friend wise until the baby was already here. Like the day the baby was born, like 2 or 3 days later, that's when I announced on Facebook that we just had a baby. So I didn't even want to tell anybody because I didn't want, if something went wrong, I didn't want anyone, throwing another pity party for me, because I know people kind of looked at you different, or it's weird when your child dies. Everyone else is kind of, they feel sorry for you at the time, but then they're going to move on to whatever they were doing before, and they don't understand that your life is completely different now, and there literally is something called the new normal, where the person you were before that happened, that before that tragedy, is completely different from the person that you are after that tragedy. Like I felt like I was almost like a child, even though I was well into my 30s. I was like 30-something years old when it happened. I felt like I was still like a child, an innocent back then before it happened. And then I felt like after my daughter died, I felt like I was a grown man, not even a grown man, but an old man after it happened. Like I immediately became this old, weary adult after my first child died, So that's just, a lot of people don't understand that if you've never been through it. For those who have been through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And a lot of people might ask you and try to wonder, why aren't you the same fun-loving person you were before this happened? And the truth is, you're never going to be that person ever again, because emotionally you've been hurt so bad, it's just beyond. It's like if a glass breaks or a cup breaks, you can put it back together. Yeah, you can glue that ceramic cup back together, but it's never going to be like it was before it was broken. So for us, that's how we are. We're never going to be the way we were before we were broken. Even if we can, put some parts together again to move forward and function still. And there are some people who never get past that. There are some people who just can't function anymore. And I'm glad I got the psychological help by going to groups and stuff like that, so I could function and move forward. But still, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not 2012 Chris anymore. And some days I feel bad that I'm not that person anymore. I feel bad for my wife or people that I knew back then that I'm not that person. But my wife understands, because she's not that person anymore. As great as my wife is, I can tell she is not 100% that girl that I met back in 2004 on South Beach. That bubbly, smiling girl that I met back then she's not there completely anymore. That's not to say she doesn't have happy moments or she's not a happy person, especially now that we do have a daughter. My wife laughs a lot with my daughter now, but I can tell that bubbly girl is not there that was there before that tragedy. Okay, it hurt her deeply. I think it hurt. I won't say, I won't have a pain Olympics and say it hurt her more than it hurt me, because I think the pain is different between fathers and mothers. Mothers feel like they didn't, their body couldn't protect that child, and for fathers I feel like I couldn't protect my wife and the child. So that overall responsibility as a father, you feel like you failed in protecting your family. The one thing you were supposed to be able to do great. I was doing good with the career and the money and everything, but the one thing I should have been doing as far as protecting my family, I failed at miserably. That's how I feel, even though neither my wife or I had anything really to do with it. It was just one of those things that happens. Stillbirth, miscarriages, or sometimes those are things that happen that you have no control over. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it just happens to normal people, and that was the thing that got to me. It was like we're not drug users. We weren't out there drinking. We don't do ghetto stuff. Neither one of us drinks or smokes. We weren't doing anything stupid, but it happened to us. And if you believe in a higher power, the first question you're going to ask is, why me? That's one of those things that never really gets answered, but it's one of those things that just happens to people, and you gotta find a way to get through it and move on. So hopefully I haven't bummed people out too much by talking about this, but I wanted to share a little bit about it because, like I said, it's the anniversary. Plus, there are people out there who have gone through it. Like, once I talked about it, I've met a lot of people who I didn't even know had went through something like this before, have shared their stories with me. And if you want to do that in the comment section, please feel free. I'd be glad to hear it. And that's usually what we need, is someone to talk to who understands what we're going through. It's sad to say that, but I've been a good resource for talking with people who, especially a lot of men who have gone through the same thing. A lot of fathers who have gone through this same thing. I've been a good resource for them, just talking to them and telling them and trying to give them strength to move forward and move on. So if you're one of those types of people that does need someone to talk to, my ear is open, because like I said, for something like this, I know all about it and I know what you're going through. I really do. Anyway, Chris Crazy House signing out.